This is the story of a boy named Alex. Alex thought moving into his college dorm would bring him independence, new friends, and late-night study sessions. He never imagined it would also bring him a roommate he couldn't see, couldn't hear, but could definitely feel. A roommate who never truly checked out. Alex dragged his last cardboard box into dorm room 313, a tiny Spartan cube on the 3rd floor of Northwood Hall, a notoriously old and drafty building at State University. It was orientation week, and the air buzzed with nervous energy and the smell of fresh paint trying to hide decades of history. His roommate, a quiet engineering major named Ben, was already settled in, his side of the room meticulously organized. Alex, a liberal arts major more inclined to chaos, just wanted to dump his stuff and find the nearest pizza place. The first few nights were typical dorm life. Loud music from down the hall, muffled laughter, the occasional midnight fire alarm. Drill. But then, the sounds in their room started. It began subtly when Ben was out. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound, coming from the wall behind Alex's bed. Tap, 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 like a branch hitting the window, but there were no trees close. Enough. He'd check, find nothing, and dismiss it as the building settling. He tried to joke about it with Ben. "Dude, this dorm's haunted. I think I've got a poltergeist." Ben, always logical, just shrugged. "Probably the old pipes, man, or rats." Then came the whispers. Not actual words, but soft, sibilant murmurs that seemed to float around his bed when he was trying to sleep. They'd be just on the edge of hearing, like a radio tuned slightly off frequency. He'd sit bolt upright, heart pounding, straining to listen, but the moment he focused, they'd vanish. He started losing sleep, feeling perpetually tired and on edge. Ben never seemed to notice. "You okay, man? You look like you just saw a ghost," then commented one morning, a rare attempt at humor. Alex just gave a tired, forced smile. The real terror began when objects started moving. Small things at first. His car keys, left on his desk, would mysteriously reappear on his pillow. A textbook, placed neatly on his shelf, would be found on the floor, open to a random page. He accused Ben of pranks. "Dude, seriously, this isn't funny," Alex yelled one night after finding his glasses in the cereal box. Ben, looking genuinely confused, swore he hadn't touched anything. The tension between them grew. One particularly stressful night, deep into midterms, Alex was pulling an all-nighter at his desk. Ben was already asleep, his soft snores filling the air. Alex was exhausted, his eyes gritty. He heard the tapping again, louder now, more insistent, coming from directly behind his head, from the wall. Tap dash tap dash tap dash tap dash tap. He tried to ignore it, burying his face in his textbook. Suddenly, a cold, heavy pressure settled on his shoulders, pushing him down into his chair. He gasped, trying to stand, but he felt pinned. The temperature in the room plummeted, and he could see his breath fogging in the air. The whispers returned, surrounding him, now clearer, more distinct, twisting into a single, agonizing phrase, chanted over and over. "You took my spot. Terror paralyzed him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He could feel cold, unseen fingers pressing into his shoulders, urging him down. He glanced frantically at Ben's bed. Ben was still asleep, unmoving, completely oblivious. Then, the desk lamp directly in front of Alex flickered wildly, then exploded with a loud pop, plunging his corner of the room into darkness. In the brief, lingering afterimage of the flash, Alex saw it. A faint, shimmering outline of a figure standing directly behind him, impossibly tall, its head tilted, looking down at him. It was translucent, like heat haze, but undeniably there. Its eyes, though vague, seemed to burn with a cold, desperate fury. The pressure on his shoulders vanished. The room returned to its normal temperature. The whispers ceased. Alex scrambled out of his chair, stumbling backwards until his back hit the opposite wall. He stood there, panting, eyes wide, staring at the empty space behind his desk. Ben woke up with a groan. "Dude, what was that pop? What did you do?" Alex couldn't speak. He just pointed a trembling finger at the shattered lamp, then at the empty space. Ben, rubbing his eyes, looked at the broken lamp, then at Alex's terrified face. He slowly, hesitantly, got out of bed. The next morning, Alex packed his bags. He moved out of Northwood Hall, despite the penalties. He couldn't bring himself to explain it to Ben or his parents. He just knew he couldn't stay in room 313. He transferred to another dorm across campus, a modern one with no history. He sometimes laughs about how he couldn't handle the noisy neighbors, but the lingering tremor in his hand whenever he hears a distant tap, and the way he always leaves a spare chair in his room, tells a different, much deeper story. He still wonders who had that spot before him, and if they ever found a new one. This is the story of a boy named Sam. Sam loved the quiet solitude of the college library, especially late at night, when the stacks were empty and the only sound was the rustle of turning pages. He considered himself a master of procrastination, often staying past closing. He never realized he wasn't the only one, browsed the endless rows of forgotten knowledge. And some patrons never returned their books. Sam was a night owl, a creature of habit, and a self-proclaimed expert in cramming. His favorite haunt was the old, sprawling university library. Specifically, the dimly lit, labyrinthine section dedicated to pre-1900 literature, a place so dusty and forgotten, even the librarians seemed to avoid it. The old oak tables and heavy silence were perfect for his last-minute essay writing. He often stayed past the official closing time of midnight, hiding in a secluded corner until the cleaning staff left, then emerging to enjoy the eerie, solitary peace of the empty building until dawn. It was his own little secret rebellion, a quiet thrill. His routine was meticulous. At 11:55 p.m., he'd hide behind a tall stack of obscure philosophy texts in Section B. The cleaning crew would do their rounds, their vacuum cleaners a distant hum. By 1 a.m., the building would be silent. Then, he'd emerge, brew himself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the staff room, and settle back into his chosen study carrel. It was during one of these solitary nights that he started noticing it. A faint, almost imperceptible shuffle from a distant aisle. He'd freeze, listening, but it would stop the moment he focused. He blamed it on the settling of the old building, or perhaps a mischievous rat. Just the ghosts of overdue books, he'd joke to himself, trying to dispel the prickle of unease. Then came the books. Books he hadn't touched, or even looked at, would be found on his study carrel when he returned from a coffee break, always open to a specific page, always on topics he hadn't been researching, obscure folklore, ancient rituals, forgotten languages. He'd glance at them, bewildered, then put them back. But they'd reappear. He started to feel like someone was suggesting reading material. One particularly intense night, right before his final exams, Sam was deep in the heart of the empty library, surrounded by the oppressive quiet. He'd hidden as usual, waited for the cleaners, and then emerged. As he walked past the vast, empty reading room, he heard a distinct whisper from the central desk, the one where the head librarian usually sat. It was too soft to discern words, but it was there, a low, sibilant sound. He froze, his heart pounding. "Hello?" He called out, his voice sounding thin and small in the cavernous space. No response, just the silence. He tried to laugh it off. "Too much caffeine, Sam," he mumbled to himself. He settled into his carrel in the pre-1900 section. pulling out his laptop. But as he worked, he heard it again. A series of soft thuds coming from the upper levels of the stacks like heavy books being dropped, one after another, rhythmic. Thud, thud. He knew that section was rarely touched. He could feel a cold breeze, despite the warm night. He grabbed his phone, ready to call campus security, but then hesitated. What would he say? "Hi, I'm illegally in the library after hours, and I think a ghost is dropping books." He decided to investigate. He slowly made his way to the stairwell leading to the upper stacks, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The thudding stopped the moment he reached the landing. The silence was absolute. He walked through the narrow aisles, his flashlight sweeping across the dusty spines of forgotten books. Everything was perfectly in place. He sighed, feeling foolish. As he turned to leave, he heard a soft, almost imperceptible humming coming from deeper in the stacks. A melodic sound, strangely unsettling. He cautiously followed it. It led him to a section labeled Rare Texts, Restricted Access. The door to this section, usually locked with an electronic keycard, was ajar. He pushed it open slowly. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. The humming was louder now, a low, mournful tune. His flashlight beam played across the shelves, revealing books bound in ancient leather, their titles unreadable in the dim light. He scanned the small room, and then he saw it. In the very center of the room, standing beside a tall, empty podium, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, almost entirely obscured by shadows, but undoubtedly there. It seemed to be facing the podium, its head bowed, its form almost merging with the darkness. He couldn't make out any details, but he felt an overwhelming sense of profound sorrow emanating from it. The humming stopped. The figure slowly, deliberately, began to turn its head towards him. Terror seized Sam. He didn't wait to see its face. He slammed the door shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent library. He ran blindly through the stacks down the stairs, bursting through the main doors, not stopping until he was out in the cold night air, gulping down lungfuls of oxygen. He never went back to that library at night. He finished his degree, barely, pulling all-nighters in coffee shops. He sometimes jokes about how he got too serious about studying, but the way he shivers uncontrollably whenever he hears a distant hum or sees an old, leather-bound book tells a different, much darker story. He still wonders what rare text that figure was looking for, or perhaps what collection it was adding to. This is the story of a boy named Chris. Chris was a college student, making extra cash as a night courier, delivering packages to all corners of the city. He thought he knew the dark side of urban life, the sketchy neighborhoods, the strange characters. But his last delivery would take him to a place that wasn't on any map, a place where packages never truly arrived and no one ever truly left. Chris navigated his beat-up Honda Civic through the sprawling, interconnected suburban streets of upstate New York. It was almost 4 a.m., and he was on his last delivery for Night Runner Couriers, a gig he picked up to pay off student loans. The package was a small, unmarked brown box, unusually heavy, addressed simply to the recipient, 44 Larchwood Lane. The GPS insisted the address was valid, but as he drove deeper into the older, more secluded part of town, the street names grew increasingly archaic, the houses more dilapidated, and the streetlights grew sparser. Larchwood Lane was barely a street, more like a gravel path winding through dense, overgrown woods. His headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating thick undergrowth pressing in on both sides. The houses, when they appeared, were ancient, slumped structures, some with boarded-up windows, others entirely dark. A pervasive chill hung in the air, despite it being a mild summer night. He finally found 44 Larchwood Lane. It wasn't a house. It was an old, abandoned, two-story factory building, its windows shattered, its brick walls crumbling. A tall, rusted chain-link fence surrounded it, topped with barbed wire, and a sign hung crookedly on the gate. "Danger, do not enter." Chris checked his delivery manifest again. 44 Larchwood Lane, it clearly stated. "Deliver to front entrance." Chris felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was clearly a mistake. He tried to call dispatch, but his phone had no signal out here. Of course, he was about to turn around when he noticed something. The gate, though chained, had a small section of the fence bent inward, almost perfectly creating an opening for someone to slip through. And just inside that opening, on the overgrown weeds, was a freshly trodden path, leading directly to the factory's main entrance. He stared at the small, heavy box on his passenger seat. It felt like it was humming, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. The box seemed to compel him to demand delivery. "Fine," he muttered, "I'll just leave it at the gate." He grabbed the box, pushed through the bent fence, and quickly walked up the path, his heart pounding in his chest. As he neared the main entrance, a massive rusted steel door, he noticed something else. On the dusty ground directly in front of the door, there was a fresh, single footprint. It was a clear boot print, distinct in the grime, but it seemed unnaturally long, narrow, with an odd, elongated toe. It wasn't his boot print. He placed the box on the ground beside the door and pulled out his scanner. No signal. He sighed, pulling out his phone to take a picture, just like he did for every other delivery. As the camera focused, he saw it in the live feed on his screen. Behind him, reflected in the shattered glass of a window on the factory's second floor, a tall, skeletal figure stood. It was almost translucent, like a mirage, its limbs impossibly long, its head tilted. Watching him. Chris dropped his phone, the screen shattering with a sickening crack. He scrambled back, stumbling over the weeds, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't look at the window again. He ran blindly, back through the gate, not stopping until he was back in his car, fumbling for the keys. He sped away, the eerie factory disappearing in his rearview mirror. He drove until the sun began to rise, until he found a diner and ordered 3 cups of coffee, still shaking. He told dispatch he'd had a flat tire, that the address didn't exist. He knew they wouldn't believe him. He never delivered for night runner couriers again. He sold his Honda Civic, saying it had too many miles. He sometimes jokes about how he just wasn't cut out for the nightlife, but the way he visibly flinches at the sight of an unmarked brown box, or the sudden unexplained chill in a room, tells a different, much darker story. He still wonders what was in that box, and who or what was waiting for it at 44 Larchwood Lane, in a place that should have been utterly abandoned. He often has nightmares about that elongated footprint, and the chilling thought that some packages are never truly delivered.